Hi everyone, Angus Campbell here, Friday the 3rd of January 2020. So after the quick introduction to 2020 that I videoed on the 1st of January and published yesterday morning, then the cat's out tonight, so the mice are going to play, and we may as well get the 2020 party started. So back onto the Fury SS, and tonight I'm going to focus on the parts to install on the timing side of the crankcases, but also the oil pumps, the oil pump and all the bits and pieces associated with that as well. So what I've got here in front of me, firstly, is in here being washed at the moment in gunk is the cam chain helical drive pinion, its spindle, also the crank pinion that runs off, and in there also is the worm drive that goes on the crank end as well for the oil pump. So they're having a bath at the minute. They're quite greasy and oily, so I've chosen to clean those up in gunk rather than put them into the ultrasonic cleaner. What I've also got is the oil pump itself with the oil pipe unions mounted to it. And what we want to do with this is we are going to slightly take this apart just to make sure it's been fitted together correctly, just to make sure the spindles aren't the right way around and the oil pump unions on the correct way around as well. And actually we've got to clean it out at the same time as well, because it's got some gunk in the end of it that I've just noticed. So that's easy enough to do, because essentially all of that component there is just held together by two countersunk Allens that unscrew from this end, and then we're able to take the oil pipe unions off, and we'll get access then to the pump, and we'll just prise that apart just to make sure that's correct, because obviously it's quite important. I've got a feeling on first inspection that the pipes might be on the wrong way round, but anyway, we'll soon be able to sort that out. That's easy enough to correct. But actually, on second thoughts, we've already done a first fit on this, and if the pipes are on the wrong way round, then the spigot for the worm drive gear wouldn't engage. It'd be the wrong way round. So that bodes well in the fact that that probably has been fitted the right way around. Anyway, we're going to check that out. We've got the plaint, and it's for mounting bolts that bolt onto the other side here that actually clamp the pump in. There's a gasket that goes on the back face of the pump, and as you may have seen in a previous video, I've got an ex-factory box of gasket batches, and I've got one for the oil pump, and it's quite a job untying this and tying it back up, but I will do that because I've done it once before when I built up the Bandit. We just took one of these gaskets out of this little pack, complete with its label and the correct part number and everything, and I quite like originality like that. So at some point I'm gently going to undo these, take one of the gaskets and tie them back up. Hopefully that's going to be therapeutic rather than stressful. And then finally, we've got the cap and spring that fits on top of the oil filter chamber, and we've got a new oil filter to go in there as well. So I've got all the components to sort this side out, because once we've sorted this side out, we'll then be in a position to fit the bottom end of the motor into the rolling chassis. So let me get the tools out, get any of the bits and pieces that I need. Let me gently tease out one of these gaskets and then I'll bring you back. Right, hi everyone, it's the next day. I'm back, but I've had a few technical problems last night, and also realised that some of the footage that I created actually didn't show you what I intended to show you. So I'm just going to go through it again. So I can assure you that I didn't spend all night trying to untie that little bundle, extract a few gaskets and tie it up. It did take me a little while, but anyway, it's back together. And yeah, sorry, I'm a bit anal about that stuff, and I just think that's just all part of the history. But anyway, I've got a few gaskets out now for all the other Furies and Bandits that I'll come across in the future, not probably. So they can go back to bed, and we can now continue. And as you can probably see from the wide angle, we've got the GoPro in action too. So you'll definitely see everything in shot this time because I can monitor it properly. Right, so where we are then, we've got the gasket out, and the reason being that the gasket sits effectively, it's on top of the oil pump, but it's the base of the oil pump because we're putting it in that way. And just getting this the right way around, it sits on it. There we go. Sits on it like so. And you can see it's cut out to allow for the worm drive and spindle that sits on top of it and engages with that spigot to drive it, and the worm is driven from the crank. And these essentially fit in. If you can imagine that in this column up here, actually, this is where the pump fits there, followed by the worm on its spindle, which engages with the crank. And then above the worm drive spindle, there's a slot because another spindle fits on top of that extends up to the threaded hole here, which is the guide then and the connection for the tacho drive. So that's what the tacho is driven off. And then just to the front and side of it is the cavity here for the oil filter, the full flow oil filter, which is here. And then to mount the pump, what happens is that this plate slots over, and 4 nuts then clamp this once you insert the pump in there. It's got to be a nice flush fit, which it is. Essentially the pump slides in there with a bit of lubrication and then is clamped in place. Now what we've got to do, as I say, is just check this pump and its pipe unions are in the right orientation, and that they're not the wrong way round, so that the pump will actually function correctly. So the first thing is that this is an original pump. I do have a brand new replacement that's been manufactured, but this is an original pump. It has been rebuilt once, although I do know that it is a bit grubby and probably wants a bit more of a clean, which will do. But the gears do turn nice and freely by finger just on that small spigot, but we will take this apart. So the first thing to do is to undo just simply 2 quite long countersunk Allen screws with a really small head. It's 3/32. It shouldn't be that tight. And what we'll do is we'll take note then as to which way round the oil pipe union is. Well, actually what they call it in the book, which I was just looking at, is this is the oil pipe junction block. We'll just make a note of the orientation of that, and then we'll look at the pump. One, to make sure that the oil pipe junction block is on the right way around, but also to make sure that the pump sits in its housing the correct way round and that the gears are in the correct way round. There is only one way in which to put the gears, as long as you've got the right set of gears in there, both the drive side and the driven side. So the driven side, two gears just rotate around a floating central spindle, whereas the drive side gears are obviously fixed. One gear is part of the driven, or the driving spindle I should say, and the other gear sits on a slot within it, so those gears aren't free obviously. Right, so what we're going to bear in mind here then is, as we're taking this off, is that obviously the oil pipes point backwards, and that the way that they positioned orientation wise at the moment is with this groove and hole in the oil pump on that side, and that groove and hole relates to the return feed. And the reason that groove is there is to allow oil from a hole within the casing, which is the return feed hole, to be directed, the oil to be directed then to the requisite side of the pump. So that it's actually returning and not feeding. So we'll take that off. We've got one O-ring here which acts as the oil seal for the mount, and I can assure you that if that's not present, or if it's in poor condition, then you get a pretty good oil flow out the bottom. So what we need to do now then is, we know that this groove should be facing backwards. First of all, we can turn the poor old engine over. Bring it towards you so you can see it a bit better. Like so. And all I'm going to do is just do a visual check. So the oil return hole within the casting is on, from the way we're looking at it, on the bottom side of it. We know that that's going to be pointing backwards. We know where the slot has to go, and there is also a locating dowel as well in the pump, so that it can only fit in one direction. And if we do a quick orientation of that, which would be like so, that would be with the pipes pointing backwards. Then we've got the end of the slot for the return does line up with the return hole in the crankcase. So basically that means that the pipe junction block was on the correct way round. which is good, i.e. that way round. Next thing to do is we can actually see from the underside of the pump that the gears, the driven side gears and the driving side gears and the driven side gears are the correct way around. And in fact, on the driven side, we should be able to just take, and we can just push that spindle through, because that's a floating spindle. So that is all correct. I suppose what we can do as well is we'll take out the backside driven gear gently. There we go. And the spindle. There we go. Just to check that the other gears are in there, which they are. I have checked all these gears before, they're in very good condition, and in fact I've got a lot of spares as well, so I don't think they'll ever be needed. So, I think the pump's all good and was in the right orientation. So what we need to do now then is put the junction block back with its 2 Allen screws, countersunk. Make sure they're nipped. There isn't a torque wrench setting for those, not that you'd be able to get one on anyway. And what we'll do now is I'm going to give that pump on the exterior a bit of a clean, and also what I need to find as well is a soft thrust washer that fits between the pump driving spigot and the worm spindle. So let me do that, and I'll bring you back. Okay, that's the pump and oil pipe junction all cleaned up. Feels a little dry now, so we'll oil that up. And also what I've done is made up a thrust washer, just slightly modifying another at the right thickness and the right diameter central hole to both sit on there as a snug fit without slopping about, which it does, but then also for the spindle to sit on there without the spigot bottoming out on the bottom of the slot, if you like. So in other words, it fits nice and flush onto that washer, and that's why the washer's got to be thick enough to do that. And there we are, that'll turn the pump then like so, which is good. So I'm pleased with that. That's a nice fit. And what we'll do now then is grab a rag for a start, but we'll just put a bit of oil into this pump. Just make sure also that everything is cleaned out. Just noticed a bit of residual gunge there. That's better. And we can attack it through its two holes. So that's the feed hole. Just to oil up the gears, we don't want too much in here, just to make sure it's wet. And that's its return hole. That's beautiful. Turns very easy by hand, very smooth. Okay, so the first thing to go up then is the spindle. So again, we'll just put a little bit of oil on that. And then we just push that up into position. You might just have to turn that a little with a screwdriver just to seat it properly. Like so. That's fine. It's a nice snug fit. That's great. And then what we need to do with the pump is first make sure we've got the sealing ring on. And seated like so. Then we have the gasket and the washer, the thrust washer. And what I'm going to do here is, before I come back to that, let's put that together in a minute, you just, you won't be able to see this unfortunately. I just need to do it like that to try and prevent the parts from moving about too much when I insert this. And actually what I should have done as well is just take a note of where that slot is in the worm spindle. Maybe just suggest it's upside, it's straight up and down. And similarly, you can set the pump spigot straight up and down, roughly. And we should be good to go. Gently tease that in. Might need to lube that up a bit more actually. It's nice and snug. It's going. I don't want to. In fact, what we can do there as well, I think, maybe a seal that gasket at the top. That's good. That sits there on its Todd. We've got to make sure that is in exactly the right position, otherwise we'll be blocking the oil feed. Okay. That's better. So that slides in there better, but I'm not happy about that gasket being up there on its own because the locating dowel's on the pump. So I think I'm going to go back to plan A, and I'm going to put that gasket on the pump. It is in the right position. Let's give it another go. Right. Just going to give that a little tap. I'm just wondering at the moment whether that O-ring is just slightly too thick a diameter, actually. Whether or not we can just gently tease it in. trouble with the bolts now. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, the camera got cut off at one point there, but what with a bit of patience, what I've determined is that this has been tapped to quarter UNF and not, as in the parts book, as a quarter UNC. So we've got the correct length bolts and UNF, and also what I've done as well is the mounting plate has obviously been machined from solid, and it's not an original part, and the fitting wasn't perfect. It was okay, but not perfect, and I was having a bit of a problem with one of the bolts. But what I've done is I've found an original, I think it's casting, and so I've fitted that, and that is a lot better. So what we can do is gently offer up the plate and push the pump into place gently. No, not happy with that. No, it's tight. Right, so what I'm going to do, everyone, is I'm going to take this out and we'll check that fitting out again, and once I've removed all this and we're having a look, I'll bring you back. Okay everyone, job done. So it took me a while to do this, longer than expected, but all I did was take the pump and the worm drive spindle out and just lubricated everything up, made sure everything was fitted properly within the pump, etc., and then I refitted it carefully, and it's seated a lot better, the pump did in the housing, which has enabled me to actually screw down the holding plate for the pump a lot better than it was, so that the oil seal is now sealing the pump. So I think we're good, and also the it's a little stiff, but it's not bad at all. So the worm drive does move okay with the pump with it all tightened up. So that's good news. We know it's okay. The bad news is I've got to take it apart again, because I've realised that I've got to get the the cam chain drive pinion onto the crank with its Woodruff key, and I can't get that past the worm drive spindle with it in place. So I'll have to take the spindle out again, and the only way to do that is to take the pump out. But anyway, we know that's going to be okay. So we'll leave that until the next video, when we'll actually complete the other components on this side, which I've now cleaned up and just got them bathed in oil. So basically what I've got to do is, when I remove the oil pump drive worm spindle, then on the end of this crank I'll be able to put firstly the cam chain drive wheel spindle, pinion, and outside of that goes the worm drive for the pump, and then above that on a separate spindle which goes in up here in that position, that will actually mount up the cam chain gear on its pinion, and then that will complete the timing side here, and we'll then be able to put the cover on. So a bit backwards and forwards on this one, 2 steps forward, 1 back, but anyway, still making some progress. And the good news is that also I did, when the engine was upside down, I did fill the feed pipe when I was checking the pump and turning the worm drive spindle. I was seeing oil being pumped out through the correct hole, which is, believe it or not, that one there, because the oil is pumped from the pump out through that hole, through oil channels in the timing cover here, and then in to the end of the crank through that, and we'll see that again when we assemble that side of it. So that's good news too, so we know the pump is working correctly. So we've made some progress today, even though we've got to go backwards a bit now, just to address other matters when we get onto that. So we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much for watching, everyone, and thanks for any interest and comments and subscriptions as ever. There'll be a little break now because I'm going away for a couple of weeks or so to have a late holiday. But we'll be back afterwards to continue with this, and it won't be long now before we actually to get these into the frame, and I've begun preparing the 2 mounting points initially, which is going to be the front mounting point here. So we've got the correct nuts and stud for that, and also for the base mounting too. I've just got to finish tapping the end of that bolt, and then we'll be ready actually to offer up the engine and to nip it up on those 2 points initially, before we get on to the rear engine plates. So it's all coming on well, all going to plan at the moment, and I'll be back soon. Thanks again, everybody. See you again soon. Bye-bye. Hi everyone, I'm back. Let's get on with it. It's no time like the present, so I'm going to do this now. I'm just going to extract the pump and the spindle again in preparation for installing in the next video the timing gears, etc. on this side of the engine. So let's get this lot out, and then we'll end it there. Okay, there we are, all out. Only took a couple of minutes, just undo the four bolts, and everything came out nice and clean. So there we go. There's the full kit now for the timing side, for when we generate the next clips and episode. Also, just to say as well that a friend and collaborator in Furies has been in touch this morning and pointed out the fact that I'm a bit of an idiot and can't read the parts book properly, in that in line with some other comments about whether the crankcase should be secured with studs and nuts that I've used, simply because the studs, I think, were manufactured for the initial first fit. Then the parts book actually does state these should be bolts in line with the Show Fury and the Bandit, so these should be UNC 5/16 by 2 3/4 for all of them, all 7, except for, quite correctly, the one at the back here where you don't have any access to put a bolt in there, so that is a stud and a nut. So we've got that one right. So those bolts are ordered up, and again we'll sort that out in the next video. And what we'll also do is make sure that we video this as well. All that I've got to find now for this side of it is just a woodruff key, but I've got those in stock because the timing pinion for cam chain sprocket and also for the worm drive for the pump are both secured on there with a woodruff key. So we've got those in stock, so we'll sort those out. So that's definitely it for now. I'm now taking a break for a couple of weeks, which is why I just wanted to tidy that up before I went. So I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks again for watching, interest, comments and subscriptions, and see you all again soon so we can crack on with this and make sure we hit that April deadline. Thanks all, bye-bye.